When you were a kid, did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up? Now, I had zero clue, definitely zero clue. But as you guys know, I'm always talking to lots of veterinarians. And more often than not, they've always wanted to be veterinarians their entire lives. Today's guest, Dr. Elizabeth Fowler, she's no exception. Well, actually, she is. She's one of those people, you know the kind, those people that actually make the Energizer Bunny tired. Well, she also wanted to be a veterinarian since she was really young. And boy, did she succeed. And she keeps succeeding. Now, we've all been to our vet clinics, right? But does yours have separate entrance for both cats and dogs? But wait, there's even more. Now, sometime in the early mid 2000s, people really started thinking and looking at physical therapy for animals. Like I keep mentioning all the time, animals go through everything just like us. Now, if we go to physical therapy after, let's say, a knee surgery, well, shouldn't our best friend have that same opportunity? Well, it makes sense to me, and it totally made sense to Elizabeth. She now has a complete rehab center at her clinic, too. And there's even more at her clinic, and we're going to get into that later. But there's even more. Elizabeth gives back too. Recently, she went to Cambodia to help with Mission Rabies. And they set a goal, a huge goal, of giving 100,000 dogs rabies vaccines in 10 days. You heard me right, 10 days. Now, we're going to get into all this and a lot more. And I can't wait for you to hear all about the infinite Pawsabilities that Elizabeth is making come true now. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at prepvet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange. Losses and gains, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the For Real Podcast. Today, I have a special guest. I've actually got to know her over the last few years, and she's pretty amazing. She's done all these really amazing things. She's down in a place in between Austin, Texas, and San Antonio, a town called New Braunfels. So please welcome Dr. Elizabeth Fowler. Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining. We've got a lot to talk about, but I just really appreciate you taking the time to be on.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, I'm looking forward more. Trust me. Maybe when you get done, you're saying, I don't know why I was looking forward to it. This guy's a knucklehead. But anyways, what I want to do is I'm going to start with you and get some of your background. I mean, you've got this beautiful facility and you're doing all kinds of cool stuff. And I know you've lived a big life already doing a bunch of cool things. Let's start when you were younger and how you ended up getting into veterinary sciences, I guess. And then we'll kind of get forward and talk about some of the stuff we were talking about.
Well, I'm one of those usual stories of I wanted to be a veterinarian since I was a small child. And as I, started approaching the end of high school, I was like, I'm not sure I want to do that. Maybe I'll be marine biology, or maybe I'll find a cure to cancer. Always attracted to the biological sciences, though, but never could let the veterinary go. In fact, many years later, I went back to a high school reunion and everyone said, you did it. All you ever talked about was being a veterinarian.
Yeah.
So off I went, and I ended up, I was a young thing when I graduated and moved to a small town in East Texas where I wanted to see cattle, and the owners would come in and they'd look at me up and down and they said, I've got a dog in the back of the truck. You can go give it a rabies shot. So small animals seem to be my calling, and I've loved every minute of it, getting to know the families and being with them with their pets from puppyhood to the end of their lives and generations of families coming into me. So it's really been my calling, and I can't see doing anything else. My husband's convinced I'll never retire. And I said, what would I do?
Exactly. Well, it's funny since, again, we've known each other for a few years, but not really, really well, but well enough for me to really understand. It's obvious based on all the things you've done, and we'll get into all these things, that you are definitely one of those people that started when younger. So I always find it interesting when I'm talking to some vets that didn't want to be it their entire life, because most have. They've always had some kind of affinity to being around animals and doing things, and you're just a perfect example of it.
That's definitely, my daughter, interestingly enough, is in veterinary school right now, but she didn't grow up with a desire to be a veterinarian. It wasn't until she was in college that she made that decision. So, a little opposite from her mom.
Well, she'd been around it her entire life, so she's
True.
probably trying not to be like mom, like most kids, or than one of those
That's right.
people.
There you go.
Now, we didn't get into, because I know this for a fact, what vet school did you, by the way, my dogs are always going to interrupt us. What vet school did you go to, and who's your big favorite sports team in college?
Well, I'm a very good graduate of Texas A&M University, and I am a proud Aggie that must, of course, support my poor Aggie football team. But this is the year. This is the year, or the year before the year, right?
Well, I've been hearing that for a long time. So the funny thing is, for you guys that are listening, I live in Austin, where the University of Texas is, and where Elizabeth went to school was right down the road. So they're big rivals if you're not a sports person. So I think it's kind of funny, because I didn't go to either one, but now, because I live in Austin, I'm a Longhorn fan, but I have to be an Aggie fan, Texas A&M, because their football field, the name of their field is Kyle Field. So I like both of them. And it's funny too, the vet school there, I just had a person on earlier this week who went to Davis, and there's like 3 or 4 really main, probably the bigger, well-known vet schools in the country, and they're always saying they're the best vet school. So I always think that's funny too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We all have to claim to be number one.
Exactly. So let's go back. You go to East Texas, a small town in East Texas. You're doing this thing. Move us forward to how you got to where you are today.
So I did. I actually, at one point in East Texas, I changed to a different practice that was a mixed animal practice. And they brought me in specifically to do their small animal work and to build up their small animal practice. And after a few years, I moved to Orange, Texas, which is in Southeast Texas, a little bit larger. And I came from Dallas, so these towns were a little different for me. But I did a lot of small animal in a clinic that had been owned by the same veterinarian for 50 years. And he was finally retiring when I came along. So my introduction to his clinic was in order for him to be able to retire, which I thought was always a great legacy for him to have been in practice that long.
That's amazing.
And the ultimate goal was to be in New Braunfels. We knew that that's where we wanted to live. That's where I wanted to raise my children. And once moved here, that this was it. And I ended up opening my own practice. I always swore I wouldn't have my own practice, but I was a single mom. And why would I choose that time to open a practice and live for a year without a salary? I can't really explain, except I thought that it would give me the opportunity to be with my children more and to be able to take off for their school field trips and things like that. And in reality, I was able to do that because I made it a priority,
Mhm.
and my children were with me more than they would have been working somewhere else. I say this clinic's the third child I gave birth to.
Oh, anybody who's ever had a business knows they're a child, but I also, just knowing you the way I know you, I think you're one of those people who loves a challenge too, based on everything I see.
Unfortunately, I think that may be true. I tend to challenge myself a lot.
Oh, well, you're constantly doing new things, and I'm always impressed by that. But let's pause a little bit and let's talk about New Braunfels, how you decided to go there. But let's kind of educate the people that are listening that don't know New Braunfels, because it's famous for a lot of things. Most people don't realize, we have a real big German population here, and it was a big city. But there's a couple things, or several things in New Braunfels that maybe people don't know about that you can probably add to.
Sure. Yeah, we're at the base of the hill country. So we're just almost to that beautiful part of Texas. And we have plenty of our own beauty with 2 rivers that come through and a lot of river traffic as far as tubing and tourists that like to come to our rivers. Schlitterbahn, was consistently named the #1 water park in the United States for many years.
Natural water.
Natural water all throughout it, which is
Right.
fantastic. And it was always a great family friendly environment. And then, of course, we're home to Wurstfest, our own gigantic German Oktoberfest that usually happens in November. And lots of music, lots of beer, and a great deal of fun for everybody who goes. And even though we've gotten pretty large, there's still events like that where it feels like a small town. You get to go out and see the people you haven't seen in a year, but everybody's a good friend again.
Well, one of the things I like about it too, I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure isn't the oldest bakery in Texas in New Braunfels as well?
It is Naeglin's Bakery, and it's
Yeah,
still in operation.
it's pretty crazy. And then Green Hall, it's not really in New Braunfels in Green, but it's right next door to you, and that's the oldest dance hall in Texas too, right?
Right. Still in the city, though. Still in the city. The oldest dance halls had so many famous acts that,
Yeah,
so many people, even think George Strait, when he was trying to get started, played there, and they come back and play again because of the memory and still the great,
sure.
great tradition that's there.
Willie Nelson, all of it, all those guys.
Yes.
I know this is an animal podcast, but we got to put some vision for everybody out there. At least that's how I am. So let's get back. So you moved to New Braunfels. You opened your facility there, and is that County Line then?
That is County Line Veterinary Clinic.
Okay, so let's talk about that and everything you guys do, because I mean you have a beautiful facility, but every time I go there, you guys are doing you've got a new thing you're doing too, which is pretty cool.
That's true. We try to stay ahead any way we can. I opened in a small shopping center space, and I had designed the facility myself, and I was outgrowing it. So I was ready to. My goal originally was to build that new facility when I was 5 years in, and my landlord had offered me another suite. So we knocked down a wall, and I stayed there until my 10-year anniversary when I had this beautiful new 6,500 square foot facility. And it's been so fantastic because we can bring in so much state of the art equipment like surgical laser and endoscopy. And we're really everything we can do that's, the new and latest and best medicine. We try to stay on top of that any way that we can.
And it speaks a lot to me because I'm always impressed by what you're doing. First of all, it's a beautiful building, and there are some beautiful ones out there too, but it's one of the nicest ones. And as you know, and most of the listeners know, I'm in vet clinics all the time, and it really is a nice facility. And one of the things I've always impressed about you is that you are looking at new technologies and how do you guys make yourself better, and how do you become almost streamlined to have multiple different modalities to help animals in a variety of different ways. I mean, not only the typical vet clinic, but you've got that you've got. And well, let's get into the rehab that you're doing, which is called Infinite Pawsabilities. By the way, I think it's a great name. But you're constantly looking to really kind of a one-stop shop for everybody and for people to refer to you as well.
Right. Yeah. One of my favorite things with County Line is when I built the facility was I have a cat only entrance, and the cats had their own section of the clinic, which I still think out of all the things we do, still think that's such a beautiful standout.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when you get over to Infinite Possibilities, they don't get their own entrance, but that's okay because we do rehab on kitties just like we do on dogs.
Yeah, let's talk. I want to get into the rabies thing, but first, let's talk about rehab. I mean, most people haven't had the opportunity to really do that. And there's a lot of things I'm kind of fascinated by that because they really didn't really, the way you look at the human world, we've been doing it for a long time, but they haven't really been doing it as long and being recognized all the different things that they're treating with rehab. Can you get into a little bit about that and what you guys have there?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, veterinary rehab, a lot of the research and the certifications for it started kind of in the early to mid 2000s. I'd say maybe around 2011 was when some of the programs really started. And I think that is becoming more recognized now as we go on, and practices like mine are opening up too. It's been it's become my passion in every way possible because the changes that we see that we're making with the rehab services and these pets is just amazing in improving their quality of life. While we do a lot that's post-op orthopedics, just similar to what people would do, If you have knee surgery, you're going to do some physical therapy afterwards. We're doing the same thing with dogs,
Right.
so they can regain some strength and mobility and improvement there. But a lot of what I really enjoy the most are these old arthritic animals that people are just hoping that they're going to get their pet till Christmas. We had a dog with degenerative myelopathy last year and a half ago, which is a similar disease to ALS in people.
Right.
And the owners came in, I think it was around September, and their whole goal was to make it to Christmas with their dog. And we were able to start doing some rehab and fitting for a wheelchair. And he made it until after Easter. And he didn't just make it, but he had quality the whole time. And it just made such a difference for the whole family to see that. I would say some of the problems with rehab is that we spend so much time with the animals that it's even harder when we lose them.
I know. It's funny. I bring this up on the podcast every now and then. I hear these great stories, and I always say I get goosebumps when I'm doing it. I was thinking about the DM dog having that. I mean, it just really makes your heart feel good. And I was actually going to ask you if you guys are treating a lot of neurologic things, because what I found when I was doing some research on it, I was reading a couple articles on it, is really where they've learned everything, which is the complete opposite to when you always hear about clinical trials. They start with animals or whatever, lab rats and that, and then they go to humans. This was from humans to animals. So it was reversed.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, with the rehab, you don't have to, in order to diagnose the conditions, you have to be a licensed veterinarian. But physical therapists, also human physical therapists, were part of the founders of this program. And they can also be certified in canine rehab to help with that as well.
Oh.
So, we have a lot of, in fact, one of the certifications I'm working on right now is with one of the founders, and he is a human physical therapist who splits his time between the two. He does a lot of studies in veterinary rehab, and then he does a lot in human physical therapy as well.
Yeah.
Trying not to confuse my two terms, my two phrases here.
Well, that's interesting. I think that would be really cool if you were already doing, physical therapy for humans, and to go rehab on animals. It's got to be almost more rewarding in some ways.
Especially since they can't talk to us, right? So
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
truly just based on their reactions and their skill and ability afterwards.
Now, you guys are doing laser. Are you doing acupuncture and chiropractic as well?
We were. Right now, I don't have an associate that's doing that. So that's a priority for us to find that again. But one of the things that we're doing too is the musculoskeletal ultrasound and some joint injections.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I had kind of an interesting case that was featured not too long ago on a young dog that came in and had some x-rays done and looked like he just had cranial cruciate disease, which is a disease that causes the tears in the cranial cruciate ligament in a dog's knee, similar to an ACL in our knees.
Right.
And I had repeated those x-rays and also done ultrasound on him. And I actually managed to catch an aggressive bone tumor on the ultrasound that couldn't be seen yet on x-ray.
Oh, wow.
And so the sweet little dog, 4 years old, went through surgeries and radiation, and we got a little more time out of him than we would have if we hadn't caught it when we did. But you aren't expecting that in a 4-year-old dog. And I think having those extra modalities like the ultrasound makes such a difference. And then, as you know, we've also been doing stem cell therapy in a lot of the orthopedic patients. I think one of my first rehab patients was utilizing your stem cell therapies to help Achilles injury in a high performance sporting dog who everyone predicted this was a career ending injury for her. And she is back at the top of her game, just came in second in the Purina Ultimate Dog Challenge with dock diving. So pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I know a little bit about stem cells, but not that. But I want to kind of, I do this all the time. I bounce all over the place. Let's talk a little bit about dock diving too, because that's a big thing you do as well. And then we're going to get into your giving back with the rabies thing. But let's talk a little bit about dock diving, and we'll just bounce all over the place.
Sure. Well, and of course, as you said, I like to challenge myself. So I have just recently also installed a dock diving pool at my clinic that is a separate business called Positive Splashes, because we have to keep the theme going,
Yeah, right.
is connected to Infinite Pawsabilities because we also are using it for our rehab patients. And dock diving, I got into it a few years ago with one of my dogs, and my dogs are not stellar performers by any means, but they've managed to go to national competition. And it's just so much fun with the people that we meet and rooting for each other's pets and just having fun as we see our own dogs compete almost with themselves to get better and better jumps all the time. So I thought, well, I can tie this together. I can do dock diving and I can do rehab with the pool. So
Right.
we're right there with one more thing on our property to take care of.
You're not ADHD, are you? Just out of curiosity.
No, I'm not. You would think so, though, right?
I know, I am. I totally am. I'm always bouncing all over the place. But let's for the listeners that are out there that don't know what dock diving is, can you kinda just give them the basics so they understand what we're talking about?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great deal of fun with your dogs. And there are a couple of different ways to do it, but pretty much every dock diving organization uses a 40-foot above ground pool. And one thing that is done with all of the organizations is to have the handler at the end of the pool or however you're going to handle your dog, and they throw a bumper off of the dock, and your dog jumps as far as they can. So depending on the size of the dog, that may be, and their ability, maybe 10 feet, it may be 36 feet for that jump. And it's pretty amazing. The organization we usually jump with, they measure that jump, how far the dog jumps, where the base of the tail hits the water. So it's not from the front end, it's from the back end of the dog. Our dogs also participate in something called air retrieve, where they set up a static bumper and they keep moving it out more and more feet, which is fun. And then there's also a competition where it's basically a race against the clock. And they jump off the dock and swim to the end of the pool, grab a bumper, and swim back with a timed race. So there are a lot of fun things to do with it. It's great exercise for the dog and sometimes for the handlers too, just as we're running up and down the dock with the dogs.
I literally I'm sitting there I got a big smile on my face. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, "What do you do in your spare time? Do you have any do you have any spare time?"
Well, apparently I talk to you in my spare time.
Yeah, there we go. Well, you had to carve it out for me is what you had to do because
There
I'm
you
sure you're
go.
gonna run off and do something else right after we get done here. That's crazy.
Well, that's my fun time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The dock diving's my fun time.
So let's talk about what you did with rabies, and I'm not gonna even I'll let you tell everything, what the group you work with, where you went. So let's hear the story.
Sure. I had been, well, I guess since a small child watching Old Yeller, I've always been terrified of rabies. And living in the state of Texas, we definitely, and in South Texas, we have endemic rabies here as well. Fortunately, ours is primarily in the bat population. So I'd say sometime around 2018, 2019, I became aware of an organization called Mission Rabies that fights rabies throughout the world. There are certain areas in the world, particularly Asia and Africa, where 59,000 people die a year from rabies. And the majority of those are under 15 years of age.
Yeah,
Yeah, the stats are that a child dies every 9 minutes in these areas. And dog bites are the primary means of transmission and the way that people get get rabies. So I had decided I wanted to go. I was really called to go on one of these missions. When I was in college in veterinary school, I was a member of just a club in the school for Christian veterinary mission. But I know a lot of people who go on spay neuter mission type trips and
right.
things like that. But this was the one that called to me because I thought, where can I really make a difference? In 2019, my goal was to go to one in Uganda in Africa. And I had met a couple that are artists living in Africa, and they had planned to do a full art show to try to raise money with me for Mission Rabies as I tried to get on a trip. But of course, what happened? COVID entered our world before I could do that and shut things down for a little while. And so in 2022, they were starting to get ramped back up again with the Mission Rabies campaigns. And I ended up applying for the campaign in Cambodia last year. And that was their biggest pilot project ever. So most of their projects, they go to an area and their goal is 2 to 3,000 dogs to be vaccinated in 10 days. In Cambodia, the goal was 100,000 dogs in 10 days.
100,000?
100,000 dogs in 10 days.
Oh my God.
And one of the big differences, too, is in a place like Africa, they do something called a static camp, where they set up a site to vaccinate and all the locals bring their pets to them. In Cambodia, we were going door to door. So that made a whole different setting as well. And I think early on, no one really knew what to expect. And the first day was a bit of a struggle. You know, we were in a tuk-tuk with a veterinary student, and the intention was that there would always be 2 volunteers with 2 tuk-tuks and a veterinary student, and 1 extra veterinary student that was to walk in front of us and call people on a speaker to come out and get their dogs ready. Unfortunately, we were driving over an hour to get to our first location, and it wasn't really an area with streets where someone could walk in front of us while we walked alongside.
Oh,
So it was a bit of a challenge early on. It was very hot. It was in May. The veterinary students that we were with were amazing. They spoke very little English, and we did not speak any Khmer, but by the end of the week, we were all communicating just fine together. And I actually have 2 that I consider my Cambodian children that I stay in touch with quite a bit even now. But the really great thing is this is a UK organization, so it's based out of the United Kingdom. And we had people from all over the world that were there, which was absolutely amazing. There were over 150 volunteers for this particular project. And we were in the smaller hotel where we had family style meals every night with people from Australia, Germany, lots from the United Kingdom, of course. I think we were the only Americans at that particular table at that hotel and with our group. But it was so amazing to go into these homes of these Cambodian people who so many of them had nothing, and yet they were always so giving.
sure.
They were
Yeah.
they were always there to give to us. And while their relationships with their dogs are different than ours, they still cared a great deal about their dogs, and they were so grateful to have us there. And we'd have children bringing us baskets of puppies to get them vaccinated, which was just great. And while cats weren't our target audience, we still managed to catch a lot of cats and get them vaccinated as well. At the end of the first week, I came in second for the most dogs vaccinated in 5 days, and I did 549 dogs with my team,
Oh my God.
which
That's a lot.
was pretty fantastic. Yeah, well, the only thing that stopped us at the end was a monsoon that came in at the end of the day, so, or we would probably have still been vaccinating.
Wow.
But it was really amazing to know that we were making such a difference. And they're going back for the second year in October because they've got to try to boost as many of those dogs as they can. But we did keep data every place that we went, every stop, which was one of the harrowing things to try to get it all in as fast as we were working. But if we couldn't vaccinate dogs, we had to let them know how many and why. Was it because we couldn't catch it? Was it because the owner couldn't catch it? Did it run off and we just saw it on the street? So all of those things were recorded, and part of our final data as to why we couldn't get them. We recorded the owner's name and the location of all of these dogs that we were able to vaccinate. My husband went along too, and he had a job. He wasn't vaccinating because he wasn't a veterinarian, but he was very busy with data collection and educating and handing out flyers to help educate the people that we were meeting about rabies and why we were there. I would say the people I met mostly knew what rabies was, and they wanted to get the protection for their pets.
Well, a couple of things. If you listen to the episode I had last week, it was a rescue in India, and of course they've got a human dies every 30 minutes in India from rabies.
Yes.
And one of the things that came out on that was it's 99% fatal and 100% preventable if you're doing what you guys were doing.
The interesting thing is they started in Goa, India, and that is the only area that is actually declared as a rabies-free zone
Wow.
in India from the work of this organization. And their goal is actually to eliminate or eradicate rabies by the year 2030, so that this would be the last generation.
I think for it to be successful, and I'm just trying to remember some of the stuff that came up. I think they have to have 70% of the animals, at least 70. I think the number 70%.
Correct.
Yeah,
70% for herd immunity. And while we didn't make the 100,000, we made just over 74,000 dogs that year.
that's amazing.
So we made the herd immunity, which was great.
Or over there in Cambodia. By the way, first off, let me just I I am ADHD. So I'm all over the place. And I have this thirst for knowledge, so I always have a gazillion questions. One of the things I think is pretty amazing for you and your husband is the fact that you were going house to house, because then you really get to see how the people live and you really understand it versus staying in a hotel all the time.
Oh, absolutely. These were very long, long days too, because
Yeah, well, I'm sure.
we'd be out of the hotel at 6:30 and headed to our hub, which was about 45 minutes away, and then we'd load up all of our supplies, and we were out with the people all day long until we'd get back around 7 o'clock at night and eat dinner and to bed, and we'd start it all over again.
Yeah, no, it's exhausting.
But it was amazing because we saw so many different areas in Phnom Penh, and we were in the more rural area
Mhm.
the whole time that we were there, because there are I think 2 million people that live in Phnom Penh, and we ended up about in the really more rural, probably poorer areas. But it was amazing to see how everyone lived, and they would invite us into their homes and offer us drinks and food constantly. One town that we went to, what they referred to as the mayor or the chief of the village, we met him, and he took us all over and made sure people were getting their dogs and bringing them to us. But we also were in pagodas with monks who would catch all the dogs that ran around the pagodas that they could and bring them as well. So it was such a multicultural experience within the culture, I would say,
Right.
which was just unforgettable. And I don't see any way that it could ever be matched anywhere else.
Well, I would venture to say that you probably know Cambodia better than most that have visited, that are there to see it and visit and all that, because you really got to live with them. And
Right.
one of the things, I do a lot of refugee work. I think you know that in conflict zones all over the world. And one of the reasons why I do it is a reminder that when I'm complaining to myself, "Oh, woe is me," until I go somewhere else and I see what woe really is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that I had one of my students who I am still in close contact with. I told her, "You're amazing. You're going to be an amazing veterinarian. And when you graduate, I want you to come work for me." And she said, "I want to come to the United States." Her goal was to someday just take her parents on a trip to Switzerland.
Mm.
But she has told me, "I can't come. I can't come to see you until I take care of my people here.
Oh.
There are villages here that need me." And their dedication to each other and to their families is so inspiring. And I wish we had a little more of that here at this time, too.
Well, it's a big lesson, I found my life experiences when I'm in places that are less economically as advanced as we are, trying to think of the best way, politically good way to say it, but bottom line is they appreciate family better, they appreciate what they have better, and it's a good lesson for, all of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the schools over there, I'm assuming that your students are the children you call your Cambodian kids now. Did they go to vet school there?
They are. They were actually in veterinary school there.
Uh-huh.
So I had one day they had a 4-year program similar to most of our programs in the United States. And initially I had a second year and a third year student with me, and then I had two second year students. And I will say, because I like to at my clinics, I love having students with me. I love to host veterinary students.
Sure.
And these kids were already, I felt like, as advanced as maybe a third or fourth year student that I see here. And so I was very impressed with their abilities. second year at their school.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I mean, based on your experience, is, with the school, the level of education based on what you saw, what you thought about the schools over there. So they're pretty high level in it, I guess.
They're pretty high level, and it was interesting too because in Cambodia there are slaughterhouses for dogs. They do eat dogs.
Sure.
Fortunately, I did not experience that, though someone else in a group with me did. But part of Mission Rabies is that they will net dogs to try to catch them and get them vaccinated, and
Right.
it's not inhumane. It's not. I mean, it's just taking a big net and putting it over the dog so you can get up to it, you can catch it, and you can put a vaccine in it. But one of my students was very opposed to doing this because he had felt very strongly for humane care of animals
Hmm.
and especially of dogs. And I thought it was so interesting because it was such a contrast between some of what the population does with dogs and what he had been taught in veterinary school about humane treatment of animals. And he was passionate about it.
Right. Well, that's cool.
And then he was also very concerned that I perhaps had lost respect for him because of his passion about it. And I said, I couldn't agree with you more. And we ended up through our Google Translate and our broken English, and I can't say I had broken Khmer because they tried to help me pronounce things, but
Yeah.
we were able to have actually a good discussion about things some of the low stress handling techniques that I do and the things I've been taught as compared to what he's been taught. So it was, again, another very bonding experience to see how, I'll say veterinarians because they are future veterinarian, think and practice in two different parts of the world that are very different from each other.
Okay. I want to stay on this, but I have a question for you.
Sure.
So my question is now when you were there, did you come back? Do you approach veterinary a little bit different now when you came back?
I think so. I think I do. I'm more grateful for what I have and
Uh-huh.
what type of practice I have. Just knowing I think a large part of it is the human animal bond and the relationship that we're able to have with our pets here. I mean, I call my dogs my doctors. So, uh, and I see people living so much for their pets, and we're allowed to do that. We're able to do that. And you go to a place like Cambodia, and they really can't because
Right.
they're they're potentially getting a deadly disease. But we also treated some dogs for things like mange and various minor things that we saw, minor cuts and abrasions. And if the dog was very sick, we had to call in other people to come and take the pet so that they could try to get them care. And seeing that they had the relationship, but not the tight bond that we have with our pets makes me really appreciate that even more.
Yeah, well, it's culture. Here's a question too. Do the kids tend to throw rocks at the dogs, the stray dogs?
I did not see any of that, but I do believe other people in the groups did.
Well, so again, when you have a chance, you should listen to my podcast. No, but when you get a chance, listen
I've
to
been
the.
going through them.
I know you have. Listen to the one that was this last week about India because it gets into it. And one of the things that they do over there is the kids, and what they're doing, and I find this pretty common in any part of the world. They're now educating kids to educate the parents because of the culture. But the kids are taught early on to throw rocks at the strays because they don't want the dogs to bite them because of rabies. But what they're doing, if you look at it, if you take a step back, they're teaching the dogs to be afraid of humans, and then they come back and bite you. So it's
Sure,
working
yeah.
against them. It's kind of a weird deal when you think about it, but they're taught that way because the parents want them to be okay. So that those dogs come near you, throw rocks at them, keep them away from you.
And that was a big part of what we were doing too, was trying to educate how to approach dogs and what to do if you were bit, and overall just education about how to stay safe around them.
So prior to Mission being there, because I have a feeling, well, every country has their own culture and how they do things. Were they doing like a lot of countries? I'm going to use the word culling, culling. Were they doing culling when they'd see it just to like some countries will do blow darts and they actually put the dogs down so they don't to try to eradicate. And works. It doesn't work.
Sure.
But were they doing that? Have they done that before? I don't know much about Cambodia.
I believe they have, because that's
Yeah,
that is the easiest way in so many people's mind, though it's not the most effective.
and it's the least effective. It doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't do anything to stop the spread of the virus at all.
No, and what happens is they've got these, dead animals that other animals are eating and getting rabies from them. It's a crazy thing.
I know.
It's this crazy thing.
It's a crazy cycle that just doesn't stop.
Yeah. Did you see there was an article about, I don't know, a few months ago about Bhutan is now it's not rabies, but they're claiming that they're 100% neutered, spayed and neutered.
Oh, that's fantastic. I have missed that, but I know
Yeah,
I've been trying to find a trip to Bhutan, so
yeah.
at least I could go and not need to spay and neuter dogs, it sounds like.
Yeah, well, they say they did. I don't know how you measure that, but I mean, they were saying that they are, which I thought was really interesting. So, how long were you over there in totality?
We ended up taking 3 weeks and visited Thailand and Laos as well, because it took us 36 hours to get there. So we decided we should take some time and
Sure.
enjoy as much of Southeast Asia as we could. But as far as Mission Rabies goes, it was a 10 day drive, and it was our first time to do it. And we were concerned as to how well we were going to do. So we spent the first week with Mission Rabies. The second week, from what we were told from our friends that were still there, the second week is that it was a much more difficult week and much less productive than the first week. By that time, they had moved into the city proper, and I ran into a little this my last day vaccinating, where we reached a lot of neighborhoods that were patrolled and had patrols outside, and they wouldn't let us in to come vaccinate. So it became much more difficult to go door to door in some of those areas.
Oh, that's interesting. It's probably something they didn't want you to see, but I mean, it's exhausting in that humidity and going walking and doing all that stuff you were doing. I mean, so your second week, you went around the cell of the city, or do you just sleep for a week and then you start looking around?
No, at that point we were on vacation, so we never slowed down.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
It was interesting too, because Mission Rabies serves vegetarian meals while you're on these campaigns, which is fine. I'm not a vegetarian, but our hotel, we would end up with things like a soup with watercress on the side. So we weren't feeling like we were getting very well fed while we were there and going out
Yeah.
on this.
Oh, yeah.
We went to visit the other hotel, and they had pizzas and salads, and we're like, whoa, wait a minute,
Yeah.
you're getting fed.
Yeah, that's funny.
So,
So
but
that's cool. So do you have any other plans to do any other kind of stuff that moving forward in the future? I'm sure you probably want to now. You kind of get addicted to it.
yeah, you really do, because you come home and it's so hard to assimilate back into
Right,
regular life, and you're thinking, well, I worked so hard, but it was so much less work than it is when I come home
right.
in a lot of ways, and so much more rewarding just knowing the overall
Yeah.
goal that I had when I went there. So yes, I absolutely want to do it again. I think it would be fantastic as soon as I can take the time off from all these other things that we talked about that I'm doing too.
Yeah. Well, I always tell people, I mean, I've been doing this volunteer stuff for a long time, but I finally just started choosing conflict zones to do that. And so rewarding. And I was funny. I was having lunch with a friend of mine here in town the other day, and his daughter just graduated from college. And I said, and of course I did the standard question, what's your plan? And she goes, I don't really know. And she played sports. She was a swimmer in college. And I said, go travel, go volunteer, go travel. There's no rush. Go do that while you can before you get caught up into all this stuff. Go do that, because you're going to see the world completely different than everybody else if you do that. It's just so great.
No, that is the best advice you can give to anyone.
Yeah.
I think you've got to be able to visit and open your eyes and make these connections in so many places to really make your life worth living. I feel like in a lot of ways.
Well, the other thing is too, is I think your perspective, and when you get back to what I would call the real world, when you come back to that, whatever your job is, you're going to have a different perspective and probably be better at whatever you do once you get back and do whatever you're doing. And then you probably travel for the rest of your life.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Because I feel like I've been landlocked forever lately, and I haven't been anywhere. I haven't done any volunteer work for about a year and a half.
Uh,
So I want to go back to your practice though, because you do all kinds of stuff. Let's cover everything that you do from let's go county line, go back to the rehab thing, go back to the dock splashers or whatever you call it, or the paw splashers or whatever it is. And let's talk about that so people know what you're doing, especially in Central Texas, so they know what you guys do and what makes you unique from everybody else.
ooh, that's a big task to ask me everything that I'm doing.
Yeah, well, that's what I do.
I mean, well, I will say, small animal, I should probably define what that means to me.
Sure.
When I was younger, I did a lot of other, what we refer to as exotics, but now I've pretty much limited it to majority cats and dogs. And I would say we are not what I would consider a vaccination clinic. So while we do lots of vaccinations to help prevent diseases and keep your pet on a healthy life from that respect, we have a lot of really complicated internal medicine cases that we see. Yesterday, I think we ended the day with a chocolate lab having a C-section. We do some complicated surgeries with splenectomies and mass removals, and that's what really makes our job fun,
Yeah.
is that we are doing all of this investigative work and solving the puzzle and trying to really improve, again, the pet's eventual outcome, which I think is the great part. And we all love doing that. My associates and I all love that. And of course, that's part of bonding us even more to our clients and our pets, because we feel like if we win that challenge, we've all won. Yeah, there's a lot of teamwork because I always like to say we're going to work very hard while we're there, but then we can go home and we can relax and know that we've done a good job today. And we'll come back tomorrow and we'll work hard together and we'll finish the day having succeeded in a lot of areas for that day.
Well, everybody wants to have a smile going into work, not a smile when they're leaving.
That's right. I like them to have a smile when they're leaving
Yeah, I
too.
was gonna say you want both, but not my point was, "Oh, great, I gotta go," and, "Oh, good, I'm leaving."
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
but so let's go back to the rehab. Can you just I know we talked a little bit about orthopedic, but for people that have a dog, what are the different things that somebody that may not be thinking that way that would be beneficial for specific people doing that so they understand everybody knows human wise, but let's just talk about small animals, cats and dogs and whatever that is.
Sure. And I agree. The orthopedics, the easy, I've had a hip surgery or a knee surgery. That's the easy one to think about when it comes to rehab.
Right.
But we do have some dogs that don't get to have those orthopedic surgeries. And I think in a lot of ways they benefit perhaps even more because they end up with some long term care to help build other muscles to help kind of replace, not so much replace, but maybe strengthen and make it easier to walk for, say, a torn cruciate that doesn't get to have surgery. We do see a lot of neurologic cases that may consist of a dog who's had a disc that's gone out in their back and caused some paralysis, or maybe some partial paralysis that we're trying to recover from and get them more ability to walk. Recently, we've had a couple of neurological cats that are both in wheelchairs now, which has been an interesting, little more difficult transition than it is for dogs.
Yeah.
That the condition called degenerative myelopathy that I was discussing. So it is a progressive disease, just again as ALS is in people. There's no cure for it, but we know from studies that if we start rehab at an early time, we can prolong their life by 2 years just from the rehab.
And just interject on that. So when you talk about ALS, some people call it Lou Gehrig's disease as well.
Right,
And what happens is for you guys that don't really understand and don't really know, but they're losing their ability to really control their feet and their limbs. And it's a debilitating thing eventually, and there's no real cure for it except for maybe stem cells. But anyways, not cure, but to help it. But other than doing physical therapy for them. So what you're doing is prolonging and giving them a quality of life.
right, yes. And, we know now that 60% of dogs have arthritis by 2 years of age. So I think that's a place that people don't think about. rehab
Hmm.
is how starting even early, we can really prolong the time frame of quality of life because arthritis is a progressive disease that's not going to
Right.
be cured either. But can we slow the progression at all? And what can we do to do that? And even starting with a formal rehab program, and then we try to send home exercises that can be done with the owners. Eventually we want the owners to be doing the exercises at home and they don't have to see us regularly. A lot of the dogs will stay on a maintenance where they come into us periodically. And then you have the chronic arthritis patients or the chronic neurologic patients that will benefit from staying with us two times a week, maybe three times a week, maybe one time a week, whatever can work both time wise for the client and financially for them as well.
Well, so you're probably training the pet owners, like prom, or something like that, where you're
Right.
training them where they can do it at home as well. It may not be as acute as some others, but at least you can give them the tools to help build a strength. Because for you guys that are listening, what we're talking about is that when you get hurt, you and I, we hurt our knee. What happens are our muscles get atrophied. And so what we're doing is building a core of strength so they can do other things and they're more comfortable.
And one thing people don't realize or think about is one of the most important things for us is to have core strength in our abs and our back.
Right.
But it's equally true in dogs. And you don't think about it with the way that they stand. It's a very different approach to it with four legs versus two. But every bit is important that their core strength is right. And, the same thing is that if you have a knee problem, you're potentially going to be changing the way that your hips are working. And now that's going to go into your back and you're going to have trigger points in your psoas muscles. And all of that's going to feed on each other. So how can we get that alignment back and that function back so that we can alleviate all of those signs and symptoms that you don't realize that your pet has? That's the other big thing that we fight is how do you know your pet's in pain?
Right.
What are the signs and symptoms? And there's so many subtle ones. So we usually have a handout that we will give to people to start checking, with a cat. Do they jump up on the sofa or do they jump up on something low like a pillow and then jump up on the sofa?
Right.
Do they pull themselves up instead of jumping? With a cat or with a dog, how do they sit up? How do they stand up? Which direction do they sit? There are a lot of different things to look for that are very subtle. And so many times, too, the thought is, well, he's just getting old. Is he just getting old? I don't like that word.
Right.
I don't like it for myself. I don't consider old being a
I
disease.
hate that word.
And I don't consider it a disease. So that's the big thing right there is it's not a disease. It's okay. It can happen, but we can still improve the quality of life. And I'm going to keep fighting it as long as I can. And I like to do that for my pets too.
Yeah. Well, we know what to do. They don't. And I think one of the
Right.
I'm always astounded, and actually I'm astounded myself with how I really don't pay attention very much in everything. And then when I actually take a step back and look at things, this is a great example. We're looking at physical therapy that you and I and all of us would know that we need to do to build strength or whatever, but you never take that over to your pets that are running around more than we are. And if they've got something going on, why wouldn't you do some kind of physical therapy for them?
Right. Because, just walking isn't enough. And a lot of times, if you have these orthopedic or neurologic conditions, walking may be exacerbating it. And so, how do you get them to the point that walking can be maybe the best exercise again? We know that exercise is 90% as effective as medications for a lot of these conditions, and just getting your joints moving
Right.
makes such a huge difference. And the first thing to always go is the muscle.
Yeah.
You always have muscle atrophy before anything else. And how do we get that built back?
Yeah, exactly. So I know we're running out of time. I was just sitting there thinking, I think I'm going to do the reverse. I'm going to start practicing dock diving. To see,
Yeah, I like it.
you can measure for my tail and see how far, and mine's going to be like 3 feet. That'll be about it.
Well, you can catch a bumper in your mouth when you jump off.
Well, I'm always trying to. I'm catching a bumper, but not the right way all the time. Okay, so listen. Let's for everybody out there that's listening. Can you give them all, if they want to do some more research or get a hold of you about the rehab or your clinic, especially in Central Texas or whatever, some other part of the world or US that wants to know more about rehab or dock diving, whatever, how do they get a hold of you? And let's talk websites, social media, all that stuff. Can you just put all that out there so everybody has that?
Sure, yeah. So infinitepaws.com, and we do have several links on there for places like the American Association of Rehab Veterinarians. The Canine Arthritis website is a good one to go to as well, that will talk about rehab. And I believe that link is on the website also. And of course, a Facebook page that matches the website for Infinite Pawsabilities. And we try to keep things updated there with some photos and videos, and definitely on the website too.
And again, you guys are in New Braunfels, Texas, and the vet clinic, the main one is County Line. So,
And they are two separate businesses with two separate websites, but we're in the same building.
right.
Try to make it easy there.
And then the other thing that we talked about for you guys that are trying to find out information about rabies, it's Mission Rabies is the name of the group that's doing that. If you want to find out more about what Elizabeth did on that too. So last thing, I've tried to get you to tell a joke. I know you wanted me to be the buffoon, and I'm the one that always gets stuck telling these stupid things.
I told you I'm just not that funny.
Yeah, well, trust me, everybody that listens knows. I know everybody's cringing. I'm probably half the people probably just click off before this, anyways. But, I have a joke for you. And let me just do this real quickly. So anybody, when you get done hearing this cringy joke that you don't like, you can always send me an email at mkyle@forrealpodcast.com with yours, or I'll record your children, anybody that wants to take over for me anytime whatsoever. And also, if you've got ideas for the podcast or whatever, send me stuff in. Please keep following all that stuff. But here's my joke, and let's see if you can get this one, Elizabeth. What do dogs and phones have in common?
Oh my. Ah, short of howling, I'm not quite sure.
They both have caller ID.
Oh my goodness.
See? I told you. They're terrible. Anyways, first off, Elizabeth, thanks so much for taking the time. I think it was amazing what you did in Cambodia. I know you guys, I love hanging out with you guys down there. But I really do really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and we always welcome you anytime to come spend some quality time with us at the clinic.
I thought when I walked in there, rolled their eyes and go, here he comes again. But anyways, but everybody else out there, thanks so much for listening. Of course, I appreciate all of you guys, and whatever you can do to help get the word out about this thing for great episodes like Elizabeth's here. But most importantly, really, thanks so much from the bottom of my heart, for real.
For real, 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 for real.
We're supported by Let's Walk, that's here to love your animals like our own.
Austin, Houston, and Denver. Let's Walk is here to love your animals like our own. From daily walks, play, in-house sleepovers, and more. Go to work, out on the town, or take a vacation knowing your pets are in the best hands. This woman-owned small business does it all. Check us out on Instagram at Let's Walk Austin, Houston, and Denver.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.